The throne room of the Empire was cold and empty when Empress Lydia made her announcement. Princess stood before her mother with her hands folded in front of her, waiting to hear what she already knew in her heart. The Empire needed this alliance. Earth had joined the Galactic Council only 3 years ago, and the humans had proven to be unpredictable and dangerous. Had known for months that a marriage would be proposed. She had just hoped it would not happen so soon. The Empress spoke with the calm authority of a ruler who had commanded 17 star systems for 40 years. The words were not cruel, but they were final. Would marry Captain Hayes of Earth. The wedding would take place within 2 months. This union would strengthen the bond between the Empire and the human worlds and would bring peace and stability to the Galactic Council. Felt her stomach drop. She had read the files about Hayes, every single one of them. Captain Hayes had completed 43 combat missions. He had won 42 of them. The only mission marked as failed was the one where he had been captured and held prisoner for 3 weeks. Even that mission had ended with Hayes leading a prison break that freed 19 other soldiers and destroyed the enemy facility from inside. The reports did not call him a hero. They called him ruthless. They called him the human butcher. One file described his tactics in brutal detail. He did not hesitate. He did not show mercy. He achieved his objectives by any means necessary. When his commanding officers asked him about his approach, he never defended himself. He simply said that he did what needed to be done. He protected his people. Everything else was unnecessary. Had seen pictures of him. He was tall, with dark eyes that looked like they had seen things no person should see. His face was hard and serious. He never smiled in any photograph. Even in military portraits, he looked like a man carrying something heavy that no one else could see. The Empress dismissed her and walked out of the throne room on legs that felt numb. She made her way through the palace corridors, past the guards who bowed as she passed, past the servants who stopped what they were doing to show respect. No one looked at her face. No one saw that her hands were shaking. She went to her private chamber and locked the door. Then she pulled out the files again and read them one more time, looking for something, anything, that might prove the reports wrong. But they were detailed and specific. They were official records from human military commanders. They could not be dismissed as exaggeration. Had been raised in this palace her entire life. Her father had died when she was 12 years old, and her mother had taken his place as empress. Her childhood had been filled with music and learning, with artists and philosophers, with the beauty of culture. She had learned to dance and to sing. She had studied the history of the 17 systems. She had prepared her entire life to be the empress, to make decisions that would affect billions of people. But she had never prepared for this. Her handmaiden found her sitting by the window an hour later, was older than by 5 years, and she had been with the princess since childhood. She sat down beside without asking permission and simply waited. "He is a killer," said finally. "They call him the human butcher. He has no mercy. He does whatever needs to be done without feeling anything about it." Was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The Empress has decided, you know this." "I know," replied. "That does not make it easier." "No," agreed. "But perhaps he is not as the files describe. Perhaps the files only show the soldier, not the man." Wanted to believe this. She wanted to believe that there was something good in Hayes that the military reports simply did not see. But she had learned long ago that were idealists. They believed that everyone had goodness inside them, that everyone could be reasoned with, that everyone could be shown the path of peace and understanding. Humans were different. Humans had emotions that ran deep and wild. They had violence in their nature. They had proven this over and over again throughout their history. Earth was a harsh world. The humans called it a planet where everything could kill you. There were storms that could level cities and animals that hunted in packs. There were deserts and forests and mountains that challenged every human who tried to survive on that world. The humans had not been born on a gentle, perfect world like. They had been born on a world that wanted them dead, and that made them different. That made them dangerous. Over the next 2 weeks, tried to prepare herself. She attended formal dinners where she sat at the head of the table and listened to her advisors discuss trade agreements and military protocols. She appeared at public events where crowds have came to see their princess. She smiled and waved and said the right words, but her mind was always somewhere else. She thought about her mother at her age, thought about what the Empress had felt when she married's father. But that had been different. Her mother had married another, someone from her own world, someone who shared her values and her understanding of beauty and peace. Her mother had chosen to marry, was being sent to marry a stranger from a world that terrified her, a man whose reputation had been built on his willingness to do terrible things. The night before Hayes was scheduled to arrive, did not sleep at all. She lay in her bed and watched the stars through her window. She thought about Earth, and wondered what kind of person it took to survive on such a place. She thought about Captain Hayes and his 43 missions. She thought about the 19 soldiers he had freed from that prison. She thought about all the things the files did not say, all the moments between the battles that no one recorded. When the morning came, rose from her bed and prepared herself. The servants dressed her in the formal gown of a royal princess. They arranged her hair and added the crown of the house. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman who was afraid, but she looked like a princess, and that was what mattered. The landing platform was prepared for the human ship, stood in the reception hall with her mother and waited. The doors would open soon. Captain Hayes would walk through them, and her life would change forever. She did not know if it would be for better or worse. She could only stand there in her white gown and her crown and wait for the man they called the human butcher to arrive. The human transport ship descended through the atmosphere with a sound like thunder. Watched from the observation window as it landed on the ceremonial platform. Her heart beat so hard that she thought it might break her ribs. This was it. This was the moment everything would change. The bay doors of the transport opened. A ramp extended down to the platform. Soldiers in human military uniforms emerged first, scanning the area with weapons ready. Felt ice in her stomach. Even his arrival felt like a military operation. The Empress stood beside her daughter, her face calm and composed, but could feel the tension in the air. Then Captain Hayes emerged from the transport ship. He was exactly what it expected. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled the military uniform. His dark eyes scanned the landing platform with the precision of a man who was trained to look for threats. His face was hard and serious. He had a scar that ran from his right cheekbone to his jaw, pale against his darker skin. When he moved, it was with the controlled precision of a soldier who had spent his entire life in combat. Felt her breath catch in her throat. Everything she had feared was true. Here was a killer. Here was a man who had been shaped by violence and would bring nothing but danger to her world. Hayes approached the reception area with his soldiers behind him. He wore a dress uniform, formal and professional, but there was nothing soft about him. When he entered the throne room and saw the Empress and the Princess, he did not smile. He did simply what he had been trained to do. He bowed, the human way, with respect and acknowledgement of the Empress's power. When he looked up and saw for the first time, something changed in his face. Just for a moment, his hard expression softened. His eyes, which had been cold and scanning, became something else. Could not name what she saw there, but it was not what she expected. It was not the look of a killer studying his next target. It was the look of a man who had just seen something beautiful and was trying to understand it. The Empress spoke first, welcoming Hayes to space and expressing her pleasure at this union. Responded with words that were formal and careful. He expressed his gratitude for the honor. He promised to be a worthy partner to the princess and to support the alliance between their worlds. His voice was deep and calm, with no accent that would have identified him as human if had not seen his face. Then the Empress dismissed everyone except. The throne room emptied, leaving only the princess and the captain standing in that vast, cold space. Did not move toward her. He stayed where he was, giving her space, giving her control. When he finally spoke, his words were simple and honest. He told her that he understood her fear. He told her that he had read the same files that she had read. He told her that those files were true. He had done those things. He had made those choices. He would not lie to her and pretend that his reputation was false. But then he said something that did not expect. He told her that he was also afraid. The words hung in the air between them. Hayes, the human butcher, the man with 43 combat missions and 42 victories, admitted that he was afraid. He was afraid that he would bring his world's violence to hers. He was afraid that she would learn to despise him. He was afraid that he would fail at this marriage the way he sometimes feared he failed at other things. Did not know what to say, she asked him a question that came from her heart. Are the reports about you true? Was quiet for a long time. Then he said, yes, but they are not the entire truth. Over the next few days and began to understand each other. They were assigned to walk together in the palace gardens, moved carefully through those gardens, as if afraid that his heavy footsteps might damage the delicate flowers. Notice this. She noticed that for a man trained in violence, he showed remarkable gentleness with the things around him. She asked him about Earth. His face changed when he talked about his world. The hardness in his expression softened. He spoke about forests and oceans with a passion that had never expected from him. He described mountains that touched the clouds and cities that never slept. He spoke about the rain on Earth, the way it smelled, the way it sounded on the metal roofs of buildings. He spoke about the ocean with love in his voice. He told her about his family. His mother was still alive and lived in a small city on the coast of Earth. She had a garden where she grew flowers that bloomed only once a year. His younger sister wanted to become a doctor and save lives. His father had been a soldier once but had left the military to teach other people how to survive in the harsh world of Earth. When asked him about his missions, did not avoid the question. He told her about the soldiers he had lost and the enemies he had killed. He did not glorify these things. He talked about them like a man carrying a heavy weight, acknowledging that the weight was real but refusing to set it down because the burden was his responsibility. On the 6th day of stay, realized something that surprised her. She was no longer afraid of him. She was curious about him. She wanted to understand how a man shaped by such violence could speak about flowers and oceans with such tenderness. She wanted to know how someone could carry so much darkness and still have gentleness in his hands. One afternoon, they stood together in the observation tower, looked out at the capital city with its white buildings and graceful architecture, stood beside her, not touching her, but close enough that she was aware of his presence. I will not hurt you, said quietly. Whatever happens between us, you should know that I will spend the rest of my life making sure that no one ever harms you. Turned to look at him. She saw the scar on his face, the evidence of his violent life. But she also saw something else. She saw a man who was broken by the things he had done, a man who carried guilt and sadness, a man who had learned that the only way to be strong was to protect others. For the first time since meeting Hayes, smiled at him. And when he saw that smile, he smiled back. 3 weeks after Hayes arrived at the palace, asked him to tell her about the worst thing he had ever done. They were sitting in the private garden that belonged only to the royal family. The flowers here were the most beautiful on the entire planet, kept alive by special care and attention. Sat on a stone bench while reclined on a chair near him, watching the way the light fell through the leaves of the trees. Was quiet for a very long time, thought he might refuse to answer, but then he began to speak. He told her about a colony on the planet called Seven. The colony had been established by humans 10 years ago. It was a small settlement, only 3,000 people, mostly families who wanted to build a new life away from the crowded cities of Earth. The colony had been peaceful. There were no soldiers stationed there. There was no military presence. It was just people trying to survive and build something better. Then they invaded. There were a species that conquered planets and took the resources they found there. They did not care about the people who lived on those worlds. When they attacked Seven, the colony had no defense. Within hours, The humans were hiding in underground shelters while the ships destroyed everything on the surface. This unit was stationed 2 days away. They received the distress call and immediately launched a rescue mission. But by the time they arrived, they had already begun executing the humans they found. They were killing people systematically, using them as slaves, destroying the colony completely. His orders were to rescue as many colonists as he could and then retreat. The force was larger and reinforcements would not arrive for days. He was supposed to get people out alive. That was his mission. That was what he was ordered to do. But when he arrived at the colony and saw what they were doing, he made a different choice. Led his soldiers into the underground shelters. He found the colonists, including children, trapped there while they hunted them from above. He told them that they would be rescued, but they had to follow his orders exactly. Then he did something that would earn him his reputation as ruthless. He split his force. Half of his soldiers would evacuate the civilians while the other half, under his direct command, would engage the forces above ground. They would create a distraction. They would make the focus on the military threat instead of the civilians in the shelters. It was a suicide mission. Knew this. He knew that the odds of surviving were extremely small, but he also knew that if he did not do this, everyone in those shelters would die. And his soldiers fought the forces for 47 hours without rest. They used the terrain of the colony against the aliens. They ambushed them and attacked them, and never allowed them to regroup. They were outnumbered 6-1, but forced them to focus entirely on defending against his attacks. By the time soldiers retreated and boarded the evacuation ship, they had killed 1,432 soldiers. They had destroyed 7 weapons platforms. They had done damage that should have required 5 times their number to accomplish. But there was a cost. This unit lost 34 soldiers. That meant that 34 people died so that the civilians could be rescued. 34 soldiers who had families and dreams and reasons to live. 34 people who would never go home. When was recovered for interrogation by his commanders, they asked him if he regretted his decision. He said no. He said that he would do it again. He said that 1,973 civilians were alive because 34 soldiers died. He said that the choice was clear to him. He said that protecting the innocent was more important than protecting himself. But he also said that he thought about those 34 soldiers every single day. He said that he knew their names and their families. He said that he carried their deaths with him and always would. Looked at when he finished the story. His eyes were dark with emotion. "That is what I am," he said. "I'm a man who made a choice to send people to their death so that I could save other people. I am a man who does not regret that choice, even though I will never stop feeling the weight of it. If you ask me to make that choice again, I would do it. If you ask me to do worse things to protect you and your people, I would do them. And I would carry those things with me for the rest of my life." Did not respond immediately. She got up from her chair and walked over to the stone bench where was sitting. She sat down beside him, very close, their shoulders almost touching. "The files say you are ruthless," said quietly. "They say you do whatever needs to be done without hesitation, but that is not the whole truth, is it?" "No," agreed. "The files do not say that every night I think about those people who died under my command. The files do not say that I wish there had been another way. The files do not say that I am broken by the things I have done." "But you do them anyway," said. "Yes," said. "I do them anyway, because if I do not, innocent people die, and I cannot let that happen, even if it costs me everything." Reached out and took his hand. It was a simple gesture, but it meant something profound. His hand was large and calloused from years of fighting, but when he felt her touch, his entire body relaxed. He turned his hand over so their palms were together. "I am not afraid of you anymore," said. "I am afraid for you. I am afraid because I understand now that the things you do come at a price that you pay every single day with every memory you carry." looked at her and for the first time saw tears in his eyes. "I will protect you," he said. "That is what I know how to do. I will do it imperfectly, and I will make mistakes, but I will spend every day trying to be the kind of man who is worthy of you." Squeezed his hand. "You already are," she said simply. In that moment, something changed between them. It was not the change of a political marriage becoming real. It was something deeper. It was the moment when two people from completely different worlds understood each other truly and completely. It was the moment when fear transformed into trust, and when the princess realized that the man she had been sent to marry was not a monster. He was a hero. And heroes, she was learning, always carried wounds. The wedding was scheduled to take place in the Great Hall of the palace, a space that had hosted royal ceremonies for 2,000 years. The entire Galactic Council was invited. Ambassadors from all 17 star systems would be present. The event would be broadcast across the galaxy. It was meant to be a symbol of unity between humanity and the Empire. But on the day before the wedding, everything changed. Was walking through the palace corridors with her handmaiden when the explosion occurred. The sound was like nothing had ever heard before. It shattered windows and shook the walls. For a moment, she did not understand what was happening, then grabbed her arm and pulled her down, shielding her with her own body. The palace security responded immediately. Guards rushed toward, forming a protective barrier around the princess. Within seconds, she was being escorted toward the underground bunker where the royal family was kept during attacks. Everything was happening so fast that she could barely understand what was occurring. The guards took her to a secure room and locked the doors. Security personnel were everywhere, speaking into communication devices, trying to understand the attack. Demanded to know what had happened, demanded to speak with her mother, demanded to know if the palace was under assault. One of the security officers finally told her the truth. There had been an explosion in the public plaza near the palace. Multiple attacks were happening throughout the capital city. Some kind of extremist group had decided to strike during the wedding preparations. They were targeting the princess and the visiting human delegation. The security officer did not use the word terrorist. He did not use the word assassination attempt, but understood what he meant. She demanded to know where was. The security officer could not tell her immediately. They were still trying to establish communications with all the delegates. It took 30 minutes for them to locate. When they did, was told that he was fine, that his security team had protected him, that he was currently in the military section of the palace. But did not feel fine. She felt terrified. She felt angry. She felt like everything was breaking apart around her. For the next 6 hours, the attacks continued throughout the capital city. Security forces worked to contain the explosions and capture the people responsible. The extremist group was calling themselves the Pure. They were opposed to any contact with humans. They believed that the marriage between and was a betrayal of values and culture. They wanted to prevent the wedding by any means necessary, including murder. Learned that 47 people had been killed in the attacks. Hundreds more were injured. The attackers had used explosives that were designed to create maximum casualties. The security forces had arrested 12 members of the extremist group, but the leaders had escaped. When the Empress finally allowed to leave the bunker, went directly to the military section of the palace. She needed to see. She needed to know that he was alive and unharmed. She found him in a secure conference room with military officers from both the Empire and Earth. When he saw her, he immediately stood up and crossed the room. He did not ask permission from the officers. He did not follow protocol. He simply went to her and took her in his arms. Had never felt anything like his embrace before. She had been trained in formal etiquette her entire life. She had learned the proper way to greet people and the correct distance to maintain, but did not follow these rules. He held her like she was the most precious thing in the universe. He held her like he would never let her go. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, checking her entire body for wounds. "Are you injured? Tell me you are not hurt." "I am fine," said. I was in the bunker, I was protected. Are you hurt? Shook his head. I am fine. My security team responded quickly, but we heard there was an attack near where you were located, I thought. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to, understood what he had thought. He had thought that she might have been killed. The military officers in the room watched this exchange with interest. They were seeing something that no one had expected. The human captain and the princess were not following diplomatic protocol. They were showing genuine concern for each other. They were showing love. After released her, turned to the military commanders. She demanded to know what would happen next. Would the wedding be canceled? Would be sent back to Earth for his safety? The military commanders exchanged glances. They explained that the Empress was still making decisions, but the plan was to increase security significantly and proceed with the wedding as scheduled. The Galactic Council had decided that canceling the wedding would be a victory for the extremists. It would show that violence could prevent diplomatic efforts. Therefore, the wedding would proceed with triple the security forces. Spoke then. He said that he would not allow to be put in danger for a ceremony. He said that they could be married privately if necessary. He said that the symbols and the celebration were not important. What was important was that would be safe. But shook her head. She looked at with determination in her eyes. She said that the wedding would proceed as planned. She said that she would not allow the extremists to control her life or her choices. She said that she would marry in front of the entire galaxy and that everyone would see that love was stronger than hate. His expression showed his concern, but he did not argue. He understood that had made a choice, and he would support her in that choice, whatever the cost. The night before the wedding, could not sleep. She stood at her window and looked out at the city. Guards were positioned everywhere. Security checkpoints had been established throughout the palace. The atmosphere had changed from celebratory to tense and watchful. Found her there at midnight. He had walked past her guards without them stopping him. When questioned this, simply said that the captain of her security force was someone he had served with in the military. They had a mutual understanding. They stood together at the window, looking out at the city, wrapped his cloak around shoulders. They did not need to speak. They simply existed together in that moment, two people from different worlds who had found something real in each other. Tomorrow we get married, said finally. Tomorrow we get married, confirmed. And I will spend every day after that making sure you are protected, said. Not because it is my duty, because I love you. Turned to look at him. I know, she said simply, and then she kissed him, there in the darkness of her chamber in the hours before their wedding day. It was a moment that belonged only to them, a moment of peace before the ceremony that would change everything. The great hall was filled with 10,000 people. They came from every world in the Galactic Council. They came from the 17 systems and from Earth. They filled the ceremonial space in their formal dress, their colors and uniforms creating a tapestry of all the species that had gathered to witness the marriage of the princess and the human captain. Security was visible everywhere. Guards stood at every entrance. Soldiers were positioned on the walls. The threat of violence hung in the air like a cloud, but the ceremony would proceed. Walked down the ceremonial path in her white wedding gown. The fabric had been woven from the finest materials and it moved like water as she walked. Her crown sat on her head, the symbol of her position and her power. She walked alone, as was custom, showing that she came to this marriage by her own choice, not because she was being given to someone else. Waited for her at the end of the path. He wore his military dress uniform, but the emperor had given him permission to carry a human ceremonial sword at his side. He stood straight, like a soldier at attention, but when he saw, his face changed. The hardness that people associated with him dissolved. Instead, what showed was love and tenderness and the profound understanding of what this moment meant. When reached him, took her hand. He did not wait for the ceremony master to direct him. He simply took her hand, and they both knew that from this moment forward, their lives would be joined. The ceremony was unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever witnessed. It was not purely, and it was not purely human. Instead, it was a fusion of both cultures. The ceremony master spoke words in both languages and exchanged vows that they had written together, vows that spoke of understanding and love and commitment to building something new together. His vows spoke of his willingness to protect her with his life. He spoke of his dedication to defending her and her people. But he also spoke of his promise to listen to her, to learn from her, to become a better person through his love for her. He spoke of the beauty he had found in culture and his desire to honor that beauty every day. His vows spoke of her willingness to understand his world and his past. She spoke of her promise to stand beside him as an equal, not as someone he needed to protect, but as someone who would protect him in return. She spoke of her desire to teach her people about the humanity in humans, about the gentleness that could exist in someone who had been forced to be violent. She spoke of her love for who was and who he was becoming. When they exchanged the rings, the entire assembly stood and cheered. Even the species that had been skeptical about this union, even those who had feared that humans were too dangerous and unpredictable, found themselves moved by the genuine emotion of this moment. The wedding feast lasted for 6 hours. People from different worlds sat together and shared food and conversation. They told stories about their cultures. They learned from each other. The atmosphere gradually transformed from tense and fearful to celebratory and joyful. Danced with, though he admitted he had never learned to dance the way. Taught him, laughing as he stepped on her feet and tried to understand the intricate patterns of the dance. The assembled guests found the sight of the human captain attempting to learn dance to be delightful. They laughed not at him, but with him. And slowly, the barrier between the humans and them began to dissolve. In the days that followed the wedding, something remarkable began to happen. The news of the ceremony spread across the galaxy. People who had never understood humans began to see them differently. They saw the image of Captain Hayes dancing awkwardly but earnestly with his new wife. They saw the way he looked at her. They saw that despite his reputation as ruthless, he was capable of tenderness and love. Became humanity's greatest advocate. She gave speeches to the government and the Galactic Council about what she had learned from her husband. She spoke about humans not as violent and unpredictable creatures, but as survivors of a harsh world who had learned to value life precisely because they had seen so much death. She spoke about human resilience and human compassion. Established programs that brought young people from different worlds together. He taught them about Earth and about the challenges humans had faced. But more importantly, he taught them that understanding between species was possible. He showed them that someone could be a warrior and still be gentle. He showed them that the universe could be large enough for many different kinds of people. The pure extremist group was eventually dismantled. Their leaders were captured and tried in the Galactic Court, but the trial showed something important. These extremists had acted out of fear. They feared change. They feared the unknown. They feared humanity, but that fear had been based on misunderstanding and prejudice. Was offered the opportunity to execute the leaders of the group. As a military commander and a victim of their attacks, he had the legal right to demand their deaths. The entire Galactic Council waited to see what he would do. They expected him to show the ruthlessness they had heard about so many times. Instead, spoke in favor of prison sentences and rehabilitation. He argued that killing the extremists would only create more violence and more hatred. He said that the only way to break the cycle of fear and violence was to show mercy and to try to teach people to understand each other. Stood beside him when he made this statement. When the Galactic Council voted, they agreed with his recommendation. The extremists were imprisoned, not executed. Years passed, and had a daughter and a son. The children were raised speaking both and the languages of Earth. They understood both cultures. They were a bridge between two worlds. One day took his family to Earth. He showed his children the oceans and the forests that he had described so many times too. His mother met her and held them in her arms. His sister, now a doctor, talked too about her work saving lives. Went and stood together on the beach of Earth, watching their children run along the water's edge, said, "I was so afraid that I would bring my world's violence to yours. Instead, I think I brought something better. I brought my love for you, and that changed everything." Took his hand. "You did not bring violence to my world," she said. "You brought understanding. You showed us that humans were not what we feared. You showed us that the universe is larger than our prejudices." They stood there together, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed impossible. The alliance between the Empire and humanity had been built on a political marriage, but it had become something so much more. It had become a true understanding between species. It had become love. And the man who had been called the human butcher had become known throughout the galaxy as the bridge that brought peace, not through violence but through tenderness, not through force but through love. And that was the greatest strength of all.